I'm Safia Usmani, and this is Fulbright Women Podcast Season 2. We're excited to bring to you 20 new brilliant women who are pushing the boundaries in their fields and lives and serving as inspirations to so many around them. Joining us today is Izza Shahbaz. Izza has more than 12 years of experience in impact investment and banking, primarily focusing on corporate banking, investment banking, credit risk analysis, and MSME financing. Currently, she works at Karan Das, Pakistan as a principal in corporate investment and credit. I have so many questions to ask, but I guess the first one that I want to begin with is, what's your earliest memory when you realized investing in banking is what you want to make a career in?
If I look at back down 10 years, I was working, my family has been in the banking sector for 2 generations at least. My grandfather was a banker, then my father was a banker. He was working one of the foreign banks at one of the positions. Then I started IBA basically inculcated. We started doing some projects based on reports and everything. So working at multiple reports at different organizations, I realized banking was one sector where you could get an overview of the economy, because you would be dealing with multiple industries and not just be specific to one. So that would give you a better overview of where the economy was going, what are the other sectors linked to, how it affects the entire GDP and the country and everything. So this was one of the reasons where I actually ended up working for the banking sector. Started off with Citibank as a trainee, then worked my way through. Then the best thing was that I always say this, that we were one of the batches where we saw a whole business cycle happening in front of our eyes. And it takes people years to basically see the entire business cycle from start to growth to decline as well, because the financial market crashed in 2010. So everything we had built by that time, the business was grown, the market crashed worldwide. So we had to basically unwind all the deals that we had done. And that gave me an entire new perspective of how things were happening, how things can get affected, how the money market can get short, how the funds would not be available and the country could go into default. Or any of the companies, let alone the country. Country is a bigger level, but now we have seen how the policies can affect the Sri Lankan debt crisis as we see now. It is because of bad policies, bad lending policies, and agriculture country policies. So this is how I would describe the banking sector experience for me, which led to me now basically moving into the development sector, because I'd already seen the commercial side of the business, and I'd seen how the bank's policies were stringent enough to not. I would say financial inclusion is a new word that we are all looking at. So this was something that a lot of projects used to come to us during the banking sector reviews when we were doing it for project finance and everything. And because of the conservativeness of the bank's policies, capital policies, we would not actually, even though if we thought the project was good, there was not cash flow lending. It was more heavily collateralized at that time. I decided, well, I got the opportunity, let's put it this way, because I was working for Bank Alfala, and my current company is actually a financial partner with them, Karan Das, Pakistan. So somehow or the other, it happened in a manner that they offered me a job on the development side. And I took, it was a very wild decision to take, because I was a very stable job in the banking sector and things were happening. But I think I kind of got bored and I wanted to start something new and learn something new. So I made the shift to the development sector then.
There's so much to unpack here, but one thing that you said, let's just start from there. You use the term inclusion.
Yeah.
What are some of the biggest, challenges that you face in trying to, optimize the focus on inclusion when it comes to, the development sector and your work in recent years?
So, as government also has a financial inclusion policy of how everybody should have access to finance, right? So financial inclusion for us has always been to look for companies who have a potential to grow, but somehow or the other they're not able to access the capital either from the formal market. And this is what I meant when I said that when we used to look at projects and project finance in terms of the banking side, there were multiple sectors. And look at poultry. Poultry has been there, and it's one of the most staple agriculture kind of sector for you, but very limited credit is available to that. Again, if you look at the SME, it makes almost 25% or so of your GDP, but there is very limited access to SMEs as a credit sector. I think approximately 9% is, or 4.5, I may be missing the number correctly, is available as per the state bank records. Over the past years, how many, regardless of whatever policies have been made by the state bank to encourage it, but it hasn't happened. So for us, it has always been at Karandas, in my current role also, that we look for companies who cannot find access, and we look at them in a manner that we may be unlocking commercial capital for them, because once they see the name of Karandas, it is because you're backed by FCDO and PMGF, which is with Melinda Gates Foundation. So this carries a lot of weight for the financial sector also, that if these guys can actually do it, because we have a very heavy assessment process to look at. So when we include the financial inclusion part in terms of companies, there are two aspects that you always have to look at also, because we are on the development targets. We always look at how many jobs are being created by our investments. So in terms of youth and women, that's what we need to look at. Other than that, it is how much of the incremental revenue will this increase for a company who cannot have access to financial capital as it is. So like if I pick up industry, if you want to look at the transportation logistics, logistics is highly informal. It's not a very formal market, and not a lot of players, large players, very few exist. And it's a very fragmented market. So what happens is that the small truck owners are generally the ones who have one truck or two trucks or five trucks. And since they can't be part of the larger players for TCS and all of this, so there's an aggregator model that helps. There's a middleman who is an aggregator for the small trucks, and he basically gives them off-market rates. So even when it comes to financing of these trucks, in terms of these truck owners want to get financing from the banks, they can't, because they don't have any bank records. So it's very difficult for them to pass the KYC process for the banks, which is very, very stringent. Collateral maybe, yes, because the truck would be the collateral itself, so the bank can actually give the financing against it. But then there's a down payment element that the banks require. They don't have that money. So most of them actually buy it from the informal market, and then the interest rate that is being charged to them is like 36%. Whereas right now the GIBOR has just been increased to 13%. So 36 and 13, look at the difference that is available in the market. So we managed to structure a few deals while I am in Karandas, to basically do financial inclusion for these truck owners, and then build a repayment history for them. So in case we want to bring them to the financial formal sector, they have a history for that to happen.
You mentioned SMEs and you mentioned women-led businesses, right? Walk me through, and you did mention that, there's an extensive kind of an assessment process that you go through, right? But even before then, walk me through that process of, how do you find these businesses, or how can they find you? One thing that you mentioned, and maybe you could include that in your response, is, yes, the government does have a lot of policies and a lot of programs for, so many people, but that is on paper, right? We also see, and you can talk better about it, that so many times real people in real world don't even have access to that information, that such products, such services, such facilities are available for them. How do you reach to them?
So we have various mediums of actually reaching to them, right? First, we run for the women-led businesses. If you've ever followed Karandas's website or in the last few years, we run a challenge round as well, especially for women, because most of them are not in the large sector of the businesses. So, but let me just clarify one thing before I actually get into this. The definition for SMEs that we follow is the World Bank definition, not the State Bank definition. So the World Bank
What's the
definition
difference?
the World Bank definition is basically $15 million of sales, $15 million of assets, and 300 less than 300 permanent employees. So either two conditions have to meet for us for it to fall as an SME. Whereas the State Bank definition is much smaller of 800 million rupees. So if you do the comparison, we are roughly with the dollar rate right now is roughly at 3 billion rupees. So our gap for the SME is much larger than what the State Bank and SECP does. So for us, the ambit is a little bit larger, and that's why we are able to find more of these companies. But other than that, just to add to the definition, we run a challenge round for women-led businesses as it is. It's a separate pocket that we invest from. So those are innovative rounds that we do. So we have a whole media campaign that runs through it. Applications come in. Now we have it on a rolling basis, so it keeps on coming in. And if we assess the business internally, if it makes it's a viable business, we would invest into it. And we would actually give them subsidized loans, or in terms of equity, we'll actually negotiate. But then we also give them a whole process. It's not just putting in the money, it's also walking them through the growth process, like the projections, how they are doing, where they're going, give them capacity building. Technical assistance grants are given them for them to build their own internal capacity in terms of finance, growth, marketing, whatever is needed. So there's a whole process when we do this kind of investment. Then there is the other larger ticket size, which is $3 million to $5 million, which is a much bigger ticket size. Again, so what happens is we either have it through our own contacts, it's via our board, it comes via the investment committee that we have. FCDO may refer something, we originate it ourselves, via banking partners, because like I said, there are a lot of customers that go to the banks and are not eligible for their capital. So they refer to us. Then it's via word of mouth, vendors, financiers, whoever we have invested into. So this is how we keep originating stuff, and very interesting sort of businesses keep coming into it. So if we look at the investments that we've done, healthcare has been our priority sector for a while, and healthcare is one of the SDG goals even for UN. Education has been one of our priority sectors. Agriculture has been the third one. If so, these are very important sectors that we have that we invest into, but a lot of assessment in terms of financial growth, sponsors, market reputation goes into investing before we make a decision to either give debt, equity, convertible, whichever works out.
How do you and your team decide what would be the priority sector? What is that process like?
So the priority sectors are basically driven by the investment strategy that we have for the year. So the priority sectors are technically based on how the country is going to perform and where is the need for funding required. Plus, if you look at the UN Social Development Goals, so healthcare, education, agriculture, food, security, these are basically top priority sectors for any growing economy. And Pakistan falls into the growing economy right now. It's like a developing world, right? So for us, we know for a fact that healthcare system for us is not that great. There are few large hospitals, there the government hospitals and the sub hospitals, and the quality of service that is given there. So this has always been priority for us to provide healthcare, and affordable healthcare is something that is the word these days that you actually try to do. Education, we know that again, there's a private sector, there's a public sector, and how many people are how many children are out of school. So you decide which way you would structure and where would you invest into a school in terms of buildings, in terms of capacity, teachers, wherever you can actually get more people to come to school. Then it is agriculture. You are an agri-based economy, but again, not a lot of credit is actually given or financing is available to the farmer. So even with the farmers, it's the same thing that there is an RT system. RT is there, but RT takes a massive cut from the farmers. So you're not getting the money within the time frame. Like I'll tell you, to cater to, I'll just go to one of the deals that we did, which was a reverse factoring is it's called, but there was there's a company who we financed who used to take directly purchase maize from farmers. Now, if you purchase directly from farmers, if you don't purchase directly, there is a third party that's involved. So the third party is called RP. He basically purchases from the farmers, but he gives it at a discounted rate. And then the guy RT makes a payment to the farmers generally in 120 days, 90 days, 180 days, depending on the availability of funds he has. Whereas the farmer needs money today for his second crop, right? But now, because he does not have the access to the market or the system, he's going to go and rely on the RT. So we basically found a way with one of the companies. We did this as a pilot just to show an experiment to the market that this can be done, and you can you can totally not eliminate the system, but there is a way out for the farmer. So we basically financed the company and asked him, okay, you are going to go and purchase directly from the farmers, and instead of giving them payments within 60, 90 or 120 days, you're going to give them within 15 days. And there has to be a growth in purchase from the farmers. From if you're buying it 5% now in one cycle, you're going to go increase it to 10 and 15% depending on how many purchase cycles it has. And then we actually ended up doing an audit for it as well, because for us to actually show growth to FCDO as well, that the development goals have been met, we actually do a Big Four audit. And it has been very, very successful. The farmers, we did the audit, we went and visited the customers themselves. And once the facility was finished, they actually requested that if you could basically refinance this entire process. So now we've actually ended up doing the entire value chain for the farmers, not just the supplier side, but also the distribution side of it, and with an enhanced facility amount. So that's how we need to do the development goals, to measure that things are growing, there are more jobs created. It is going to benefit the farmer or whoever the end beneficiary is, for them to increase their livelihood.
Has access to the beneficiary and gaining their trust ever been a challenge?
So initially, yes. When we started, I would say when I joined the company 4 years back, it was technically a startup, because nobody knew what Karandas was. Nobody knew who Karandas was. And everybody was very skeptical of it, because it is a startup. FCDO funding was coming in. BMGF was involved, but BMGF works on the digital end. So when we were trying to design the products and trying to work, because initially because we are a company of 50 people and the investment team is roughly around 13 to 16 people at any point in time. So our accessibility to the market would be difficult to reach such a big economy. So we used financial institutions as partners because of the branch network and because of the accessibility that they had and the outreach. And because I was coming from that sector, so I knew where we could tap in and where we could not. So I decided we built a strategy and we started targeting tier 2 banks, because the large ones were too big for us. And since they had the capital, they also did, because we were also providing capital. We're just not providing facility as to basically apply risk sharing. We also provided funded capital. And the challenge that we were facing at that time was that most of the banks would come and ask, oh, you should give us a loss guarantee. And we don't need your capital, just give us a loss guarantee first loss. And we will do the lending, but whatever loss happens, you need to take it. And I was like, this is what the State Bank has been doing, and these are what most of the facilities have been, but you guys have not actually utilized it. So we're not going to do that. we will give you a funded facility where we will also provide you money. But that's where we will share a pari passu risk and loss situation. But and this was a very difficult sell for us to the market. Okay, we're not giving you a loss guarantee, but we'll share a risk with you. So it saves you capital, and we also benefit because they have an outreach. So this was a very, very difficult process for a whole year when we started. And the programs were also difficult because, when you go and try and teach a market which has been doing something for years, and somebody comes and disrupts and innovates a process for you, that's a very difficult acceptance, especially with their risk departments, with their compliance departments, because they're so stringent on the fact that, no, we don't want to do this, and why should we do it? So that has been a massive learning curve for us, and even for the banks, I would say now, because they've realized that there is potential in these other markets, and they can actually go in hard sectors where they wouldn't actually go take the risk, because everything for the bank was collateral based. If you have collateral as land or building, they would be more than happy and hunky-dory to do this. If you have light collateral, maybe receivables, they would just outright say no, regardless how good the cash flow was for the company.
Mm-hmm.
So this has, but I'm glad to say that we have actually we haven't reached the whole pinnacle, but yes, we have basically touched something that the banks have been able to figure out and made a difference for a lot of people, because right now we have roughly around 12,000 to 14,000 SMEs who we have touched as of now.
Wow, that's a huge progress. But that kind of takes me back to, a few steps back. 4 years ago, this was a startup, right? And I imagine this wasn't the only the challenge that you just discussed wasn't the only challenge. There were multiple more. Why would you, Izza, someone who has a great career going, jump onto, something that was so challenging and obviously not meeting the same kind of pay scale, I imagine, right? And all of those things that one is looking for in their career. What was it personally for you that drove you to, make that jump?
I have been Karachi based forever, technically, not and lived at a few different places. This job actually required me to move to Islamabad, which is a whole different city. And it was, I think I was kind of bored with the banking same routine that was happening. And I just wanted to do something new, because I do get bored after a while and I need something new. So I do start side projects when I feel like it. Before I took this project, I was also working with one of the schools, just for the educational purpose as a pro bono. I had started with a startup school where we were trying to get new kids in, develop a new system, and not a new system in place, but trying to break the, I would say, the tuition culture that had actually entrenched in the market, that the same teachers would teach you at the tuition center, but they wouldn't teach you at school. So a friend of mine had started a school, and I was actually working with her just to see if we can actually do certain things with them. We were able to get quite a few actually children, convince their parents to actually send them to the school, try to teach the kids in a manner that they wouldn't have to go back. And because this is, if you look at the financial cost of it, it's actually very high, because you're paying the school fees and then you're actually going and paying the same tuition fees, approximately the same amount. So for parents, it is very highly pocket not friendly, I would say. So this was something that I was already doing on the side, just to pass time and kill my boredom. And then all of a sudden, this opportunity comes where, and I've always been a proponent of actually helping people, even in my house, the house help education. I've always been a very big proponent of that. Once you have it, at least you can utilize it somewhere. So other than that, I had been associated with Association for the Development of Pakistan, where we were assessing pro bono projects and all of this. So this one just came along, and I was like, I've been doing this for almost 8 years. Why not try this and see what happens? I can always come, because the idea was, okay, if this doesn't work, I can always come back to the banking sector. It's not going anywhere. And I've been in this market for so long, I'm sure somebody would keep me if I have to come back.
So in these 4 years, did you ever come to that point where you're like, maybe I should go back?
Actually, no. A lot of people did ask me if I wanted to come back and take a position, because few positions opened up in the middle, and I was still dealing. I'm still actually so interested in the banking sector, because I have financial partners. So we use them for deployment purposes or any other purpose that we need to use them. So I'm still entrenched in that banking sector, just the other side now. So no, I haven't actually come to that point as yet. This has been a very good learning experience for me also, because I had never done, I would say, equity as in investment, because I was always on the debt side of the business. This actually, this position gave me the opportunity to work on my equity deals. We have been able to set up two financial institutions to cater to the gaps in the market. Because the idea of Karanda has always been to run pilots for a demonstration effect to the market and tell them that this is possible for them, where we have been able to achieve. And I said how many SMEs we've been able to touch based on that. The other idea of investment of Karandas has always been that if you can't address it with the partners or anybody, look for the gap in the market and then set up institutions where you can address it. So if I look at Karandas and investments, we set up there are three entities essentially, but one of them was already set up before I had come in. But the two next to IZB Infrazam in Pakistan has been an entity which is a sole guarantee company for infrastructure projects. And this is a very innovative model. This does not exist in the market. The only other model that exists for this kind of business is InfraCredit Nigeria. So this was a massive project for us to basically develop from start to finish, from a business plan to go to SECP, get all the regulatory approvals, get a AAA rating from the rater, and then get in investors, international investors, to come and invest into it. And this has been a massive learning process for me also, because to incorporate a company, to get a license, to get all the regulatory approvals, to sit on the board, this allowed me to sit on companies' boards also. Similarly, like I said, financial inclusion, addressing a gap in the market for the SMEs. Now, because we still know that the banks are very slow to give the rewards to SMEs or financing, we have now set up an SME NBFC by the name of Parvaz Financial Institution, Parvaz Financial Limited. So that is there just to cater to the SMEs itself, start lending to them. So where the banks are not doing it, you basically go and touch it. So that has been set up now, and it is functional, and it has started lending. So for me, it has been a personal growth process as well, just not the other way around. So I've actually enjoyed the ride.
So in what other ways has your worldview changed ever since you joined the development sector?
There were a lot of projects that I would just dismiss. My own perspective of assessment has changed. A lot of things, because the bank, when you do work, it trains you to think in a certain manner. And there are policies that are set, there are procedures that are there. you have to work within that frame. When I came to this company did not have policies. This company technically did not have any investment procedure. There was a procedure, but it wasn't laid out properly. So I actually had to sit with my CIO and CEO to basically develop the policies, internal procedures, manuals, just to see how to fit in both. Because this was a balancing act for how to do development goals, plus how would you invest, and it has to be, and the company has to be sustainable. Even Karandas itself has to be sustainable after a while, because this is being run on a grant money from FCDO, committed funding that we have. Once the funding runs out, the money can't go back to UK, but the company itself has to be sustainable in a manner that it has to be profitable, and it has to support the investments plus the staff. So this was basically a whole development aspect plus sustainability of a company from start to growth. If any investment goes bust, let's say we have invested into equity, they default. So technically $3 million of mine is wiped out. So how would you basically sustain this? Where are we going to go? How are we going to go? What is the strategy for the next 5 years? So this has been the whole process for me also in terms of assessment. Fine, we can look at a risky project, but it also has to impact my own capital. So let's just see where we are going to meet, balance the development plus the capital plus the return. So it's
Wow.
all in
Yeah.
one.
Wow. Yeah, it does sound like a huge learning curve, along with like all the progress that you have talked about in the past 4 years. It does sound like that there's so much more learning to happen, right? And there's so much more progress to be made. So I guess I'm not going to take much of your time, like I already mentioned, but I would like to thank you so much for joining the conversation today. And I would like to stay in touch with you for more updates as to what you're up to and what Karandas is up to in the future.